Welcome to Political Vibe on News Talk 1037 FM, where every weekend we bring you local, regional, and even national political movers and shakers to inform you on your political world. I am Michele Jansen, along with my co-host, attorney Clint Barkdoll.
Hi, Michele.
Hi, Clint. Well, we have an interesting group of guests today. And first is our guest, JP. He's a software engineer and amateur astronomer out of the San Francisco area. He is here to talk to us about saving standard time. He has a website, savestandardtime.com, and it's to argue for why we should switch and only be on standard time and stop the switch to daylight savings time. And we wanted to get the information on that because we know there's arguments for both ways and for keeping both. Welcome, JP.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Hey, well, thanks for being with us. So give us the pitch, Jay. Why is it that the government should start getting involved here with eliminating daylight savings time?
Daylight saving time is a threat to public health, public safety. It hinders education, the economy, and it even affects the environment in a negative way. And it's completely unnecessary. There's no reason for it. The benefits are very few for daylight saving time. Standard time is based on the sun. It is it keeps closest to our natural rhythms. It is the most fair and equitable time for everyone involved.
Well, and Jay, I feel like this is an issue that's been out there for years. You know, occasionally you'll hear this bubble up. There's discussion about it. It just kind of goes away. But I do feel like this year we're seeing a lot more traction on this. We're certainly seeing it here locally at the state level. Our Pennsylvania General Assembly is looking at it. I see Congress is looking at it. Does it feel different this time? Is this really going to happen, or is this just pie in the sky discussion?
I believe the days of changing clocks are numbered. It's very unpopular. It's more unpopular than it ever has been before. Most people do not really know the history or the reasons why we do it. It just feels like tradition. So the question now is which clock do we keep, the standard time or the daylight saving time? And for the last about 6 years, the activists for permanent daylight saving time have been working hard at the state and federal level to lobby for permanent DST. I didn't really notice this personally until about 2018. Decided to get involved in 2019. There are many scientists and doctors and teachers and other community leaders who have been involved, but many more are starting to get involved just within the last year or two. So it is starting to come together, and then we're faced with this big question again of which clock is the better clock to keep.
Michele?
Now, this is going to be a funny request, and I know the practicality of it would be strange, but I had a solution I just came up with on my own. Why don't we split it down the middle? Just switch it by a half hour and then just leave it there. What do you think of that?
Well, I hear that commonly, and it's a good idea. The intention's in the right place, but really, standard time is based on the sun. Originally, time was defined from the sun directly as solar time. That's the time on your sundial, in which noon is when the sun is at its highest and most southerly point, and then we divide the hours from there. Standard time made that more practical on a global scale by dividing the globe into 24 zones, and you're generally within a half hour of your solar time. And solar time is very important because we've evolved over millennia as humans to be entrained to the sun. It's in every living cell, this pulse of life. And if you stray too far from that, if you have a circadian misalignment, there's a term called social jet lag. It has you feeling tired all day. It's harder to fall asleep in the evening. It's harder to wake up in the morning. So really, standard time is the best solution that we have, practically speaking. With daylight saving, you have this 60-minute misalignment. Now, if you cut that in half to 30 minutes, that's better, but it's really not the best we can do. The best thing we can do for health, safety, education, economy is just stay on standard.
I think the argument back would be, well, but if we just picked one or the other, then our bodies would adjust. Now, you're saying this, of course, happened over millennia and very long, maybe evolutionary periods, so that might be an argument back to that. But I think right now, a lot of the health things happen in the short term when we do make the switch, especially from the standard to the daylight savings time in the spring. So what would you say to somebody who says, well, if we just picked one and stayed with it, we'd all adjust?
The health scientists are telling us that we do not adjust. The evidence shows the overwhelming global consensus of biologists is that we do not adjust. We sleep less. So if we find that when we spring the clocks forward, we have an acute harm to our circadian health. That's that jolt, and you see the spike in traffic accidents and heart attacks, for example. But as we leave the clock forward on the wrong time, we still see a chronic effect where we are sleeping less. There's an estimate of 19 minutes of less sleep every night when we have the clocks pushed forward an hour. So if we were to bring that back to the standard time, then we would be sleeping better and longer. And there already is, according to the CDC, an epidemic of sleep deprivation in this country. So again, if we keep the clocks forward, we're making the problem worse. If we keep them halfway forward, it's still worse. It really is that we don't adjust, even after weeks and months. And we've seen this before with experiments. We had permanent DST in the United States, and we did not like it, and we put it back. It's been tried in the United Kingdom and Russia, and again, it just doesn't work. And it ends up wasting money and threatening lives even. And we really should skip that step of trying DST permanently again and just go straight to permanent standard time.
This is Political Vibe on News Talk 103.7 FM. We're talking to JP, software engineer, amateur astronomer, trying to give us his take and his group's take that standard time would be preferable, and we should switch to that permanently and no longer use daylight savings time. Clint?
Jay, I was really struck in looking at your group's information, and I didn't know this, and I don't know how this got lost in history classes, but you just alluded to it, that the U.S. did implement permanent daylight savings time in the early to mid-1970s, and it was in effect, failed miserably. I think there were even instances of children that died on their way to school. So how long was that in effect, and then what was the catalyst to have implemented that in the first place?
Well, so the United States has done permanent DST twice, actually. We did it in World War II as wartime, and as soon as the war was over, it was reverted because it was just terribly unpopular. And then it was brought back in 1973. President Nixon implemented it as an attempt to save oil during the oil crisis. So he declared it in 73. It went into effect in 74, and within the first month, eight children's lives were lost in the state of Florida, they were taken on the dark morning roadways. When we put the clocks forward an hour, it forces you to get up earlier, and that's not so bad in the summer when there's more light to go around, but it's terrible in the winter. So people are sleeping less, the roads are dark. So it's a threat to the public safety. It was supposed to be a 2-year program, and it was abandoned within the first year.
But the idea was what? It would save energy. It would allow people to burn less electricity because there would be daylight longer at the end of the day when people would be working and doing activities?
Yes, that's always been the excuse, and the evidence for it has been very slight to actually the reverse. The theory is that if we wake people up earlier, then they'll go to bed earlier, and then they won't run their lights at night. And that's simply not the case. Actually, when we're waking people up earlier, it's cold and dark, so they turn on their lights and their heat. And really, heat is the greater expense than electricity for the light. And then we don't go to bed any earlier, so we're not saving any energy in the evening. So it's always been the excuse of like this hypothesis that it would save energy. The real drive for DST and extensions of DST and permanent DST has been the special interests of the chambers of commerce and the golf industry. Also, to some extent, the candy sellers, the Confectioners Association, and the petroleum companies, big oil.
Well, and I've always kind of laughed. I mean, I've also heard agriculture get injected into these debates. And, farmers, we're in an agricultural area here, and they'll say privately, hey, the cows don't know what time it is.
Mm-hmm,
I mean, they're producing their milk, and the chickens are going to get up and crow, or the rooster's going to crow when the sun rises. They don't know what time it is. But you sometimes hear agriculture come into these discussions.
Yes, it was. The farmers have always been against daylight saving time. I come from a family of farmers back in Iowa, and when you live on a farm, you wake with the sun, and so they were against daylight saving time. Daylight saving time puts you out of sync with nature. But in the 50s and 60s, when the chambers of commerce were lobbying for DST, which was eventually enshrined in federal law in 1966, they invented this myth that it would help the farmers. And so that's why that is a common mistaken belief.
Michele?
Then we only have like a minute left, but I just wanted, last thing, how hard would this be then to jive, though, with the rest of the world? Aren't there like 70 countries that are doing what we're doing? Is this an international movement then to try to get everyone to do this?
Most countries in the world are on standard time. If we were to restore our permanent standard time in the U.S., it would put us better in sync with the rest of the world. And there is actually an international movement. I cooperate as part of Save Standard Time. I cooperate with an international alliance for natural time with partners in Europe who are trying to do away with their time changes and restore their natural sun-based standard time as well.
Well, thank you so much, JP. And the website, if people want to look at it more, is savestandardtime.com. I know our legislature's looking to do it the other way, so maybe we'll have to have some discussions with them. But this is Political Vibe on News Talk 103.7 FM, and we'll be right back after a break.